is not as physical as it once was. On drives to the baskets, post-ups, cutters through the lane. So on that note, I think the game is easier to officiate now than it was when we first got in the league.
100%.
Yeah. What's up? What's happening? Welcome back to Respect the Court. Basketball, encompasses a lot of things, right? And I think one thing we tend to overlook, of course, you got the crowd, you have the players themselves, you have the coaches, the assistant coaches, training staff, all of these different variables that go into one single game. Scorecard keepers, statisticians, everything. But we tend to overlook the referee. Absolutely, the referee. They are the ones that control the pace. They are the ones that control how physical the game gets. They ultimately control how the game is going to be played at the end of the games, at all times of the game. So I was sitting there thinking to myself, as someone that has played, right? I've never reffed a game. I've always been the player. So of course, there's things you want to do on the court. You always want things to go your way, right? And I'm talking about organized basketball, not when you're hooping at the Y or at 24 Hour Fitness or wherever it is. At least that you referee yourselves, right? You go with what makes sense to you and whoever else you're playing with. You call your own fouls. That's that. You regulate the game that way. But in organized basketball, with 2-3 referees, you kind of want things to always go your way. It's a sport, right? You want to win. You want to be the victor at all times. But over the years, I've come to really appreciate what a referee does and how hard their job is. I mean, there are some places, some ads, blogs, circles of refereeing in different sports that say that refereeing in basketball is one of the most difficult things to do. Mainly just for the fact that now the game is a lot faster. Things tend to happen in such a way that if you don't catch it right away, or at least you don't know what that person's trying to do, you're going to miss it. And you constantly have to evolve with the way the game is being played. So, yeah, it's a tough job. I've known friends who've done referee work for a little while. People that I've known have done refereeing work for a little while, and they'll tell you it's tough because it is a highly visible public job, right? Everyone sees what you do. Every single call you make is going to be scrutinized. I mean, could you imagine right now at your job, someone is there, like let's say your manager, let's say you are unfortunate enough to have a micromanager, and that person was on you for every little thing you did, belittling you for every single choice or call that you made during the job, right? At least for a referee, it's only like 2.5 hours. Like, this is someone that was doing this to you for 8 hours, a full work day. Oh no, man, someone getting hurt. Something gotta go down. So respect has to be given to the referee for having to corral and mitigate and really control 10 people on a court. All are gonna have varying positions on what you decide on certain things, right? So that actually gave me the opportunity to check something out on YouTube, and it's called NBA Referee Roundtable, 30 years of NBA history. And on this video, it's under 25 minutes, but it was a great viewing of 5 of the top referees in the NBA who've been referees in the NBA for at least 30 years. And they are Sean Corbin, James Capers, Tony Brothers, which I'm sure some of y'all recognize that name, Scott Foster, I'm sure y'all recognize that name as well, and Tom Washington. All have had at least 30 years. The last two I mentioned, 31 and 34 years respectively. And that is wild to see the changes of the game through 30 years. And one awesome thing they pointed out was the fact that how you call physicality back then as opposed to now. And back then, everything was in the paint. The paint was packed. So they were saying it was actually more difficult to call that game back then because everyone's crashed into each other. You need to make the right call, but since everyone is so packed, you got elbows flying, you have jerseys being pulled, like you're doing everything you can to gain an advantage as a player, but as a referee, you want to make sure that things are staying within bounds of the rules, like no one is doing too much. And how that has changed to now, some referees believe that like the physicality is now all in the perimeter. High screen rolls, trying to check someone as soon as they cross the half-court line. Probably that's about as physical as you get. Maybe a little bump as they're driving to the basket, but that's really it. No one's banging like they used to. So that's one thing they noted. One thing they did say also was that the play style, they enjoy it now. Not necessarily all the threes per se, but just it's easier for them to ref because there's so much more spacing. You can see things more than you could see 15, 20 years ago. And you have to kind of decide what is the best call to make, right? They also talked about really having to leverage what makes sense as a foul and what doesn't. And you know, depending on what type of game it is, if we're talking like playoff level, like in the old days, since everything was in the post, most things were in the post, I should say. If your big guy gets into 2 quick fouls, I mean, that changes the complexity of the game and how it's going to play out. Of course, same thing now, but they say that there aren't as many big men as there used to be. I mean, you have maybe one good big man every 5 or 4 teams, but you know, in the 90s, early 2080s, you had one good big man per team, and you had like maybe one substitute, but you had one. But anyway, it was just nice to see just, you know, their viewpoint of the game as those who try to control it, as opposed to us who are just observers of the game for different reasons, right? So I highly recommend watching, once again, NBA Referee Roundtable on YouTube, 30 years of NBA history. If it's not on YouTube, I'm pretty sure it is on their website, which for whatever reason, I can't seem to find right now. But yeah, you got to check it out. It's a really great story of these 5 guys just talking about what it is and how it is to be a referee back then and in this day and age. So it was really cool. I think it was great. And yeah, y'all take a listen to that. It gives you more respect for a referee. It's a tough job. It's an incredibly tough job. I mean, I think refereeing in any sport is a tough job, especially with, you know, so many emotions involved. Not even just with players, but with fans. And you just get the brunt of that energy for the 2.5, 3 hours that you are officiating that sport. But yeah, check it out. And yeah, another thing I want to note, yeah, these referees get paid. Like, it's a public job. It's a job that's part-time, but they get paid well, and you know what? It's well deserved. So check this out. I went over to refersports.com, basketball blog. Talks about how much money do basketball referees make, and of course, it depends on the levels, right? So you got high school and amateur, which can be $50 to $100 per game, right? That makes sense. Then when you get to college level, NCAA, you got Division III, $100 to $200 per game. Division II, $200 to $400 per game. All right, cool. We get to NCAA Division I, $1,000 to $2,500 per game. That is wild. And of course, you know, it depends on how many games you are officiating, right? Like, you might be officiating 20-something, you might be officiating 30-something. Depending on your experience, you might do March Madness all the way up to the championship game. So that's crazy. Like, let's say you even did 45. Like, it's a nice chunk of change for part-time work, you know? So you got the international leagues, which all vary depending on country, depending on league, depending on popularity of the sport. That factors into what you get paid. So I don't really have a number for that. And then, of course, you have the highest level, which is NBA level, which is entry level. All right, entry level. $250,000 a year. So yeah, of course, you've had to have some amount of experience. And y'all for joining us for this rookie session of NBA Referee Court. $250,000, and it goes all the way up to $550,000 a year for refereeing. And of course, that comes with experience, skill, and how many times how deep in the season that you ref. Like, do you do just the regular season, or do you regular season and playoffs? Do you have the opportunity to do an NBA final? So all that comes into consideration and factoring.